So here's another question that I get asked quite often. It's what makes up my credit score, or how do they get the score? So I talked about in another video that each credit reporting agency has their own recipe. I'm going to show you what goes into the recipe. So I have written a guide, and I'm happy to email it to you if you email me, called the ABCs of credit, and the reason, just like when you were in kindergarten you had to learn your ABCs, it's my opinion that you should actually learn this in grade 10 or maybe in grade 12. You should actually understand how this works, because if you're in modern society, you pretty much can't function without some form of credit, whether you're getting a student loan or you're getting a car loan or a house or a business. It's pretty imperative, but we don't actually teach how it works. We sort of just assume it's there. So, and until there's a problem, you don't really care how it works. So I call it the ABCs because it's memorable. The first part of it is A, and that is the simplest part, which everybody's aware of, and that's always pay on time. And that equals 35% of your score. So it's not all of your score, so you can actually pay on time and still have a really bad score, but it is certainly important to pay on time. And if you do, it takes about 6 years for stuff to fall off your credit report, so if you've had some stuff on there. But practically speaking, lenders on the mortgage side, if you have some late payments that are a couple of years old, and they're fairly isolated, lenders are usually pretty reasonable about that. If there's a lot and they're recent, then they're gonna definitely want to know what's going on. So the second part of the ABCs of credit is beware of high balances. And what I mean by this is that if you have a credit card, or if you have a debt, and if it's very close to its limit, so let me show you a separate page here for a second. If you have a $10,000 credit card and you owe $9,999, you are become a higher credit risk, therefore your score will go down. If you happen to, let's say, same fellow has a $10,000 card and he actually owes $11,000, and it is possible to do this, your score will drop substantially. Even by going over by $5 can have a tremendous impact or a negative impact on your credit score. So your balance is actually 30% of your score. So the two of these by themselves account for about 65% of what goes into your credit score. The third thing to be aware of is credit is like, I got to really work on my handwriting, fine wine. And what I mean by that is old credit is better. So that's 15% of your score. So if you have, and I'll give you an example of how this works. So if you had a credit card, or you've had for a long time, and let's say it was just a small card that had a $1,000 limit, and you get a new fancy card that has a $5,000 limit, and it has it has travel points and it has all these extras, and you're like, well, this is great. And this card you've had for 4 years, and your immediate reaction may be, I want to cancel this card, and maybe you do. But if you do, the average age of your credit is going to go down, because this is going to be gone. This is old. This is new, and it actually can have a negative impact. So I usually recommend don't cancel those old cards right away unless you just don't. I think it's usually best to keep them for a bit until this becomes a little bit more of a mature card, in which case this one doesn't matter anymore. So that accounts for 15% of your score. So we're at 80%. And one of the funny things is that when you talk to people about credit, they always say, "Oh, don't get your credit checked. It's terrible." If you get your credit checked, and it's true, it does impact your score. So for D, it's don't be desperate. And by that, I mean don't be going everywhere looking to get money. That accounts for 10% of your score. So now that's not huge, but it's something to be aware of. If you get too many credit checks, it can impact your credit score. There's two things that I want to talk about that. One, according to Equifax, if let's say you're applying for a mortgage and you go and get a credit check at one bank, and most brokers won't tell you this, and then you go to a credit union. If they're coded as a mortgage, and it's done in 14 days, they're supposed to show up as one hit. So that's one thing to be aware of. The other thing is that if you, like I talked about in the other video, if you go check your own credit, there's no impact on your score. You can check your own credit as much as you want. That won't hurt you. So that's okay to do. But if you need to get credit, then it's important to, you do have to get it checked. And then the final thing that they look at is they actually look at the type of credit you have. So someone who's trying to build credit or improve credit, we tell them to employ 2 types. And by 2 types, and that's 10%. And those 2 types of credit are a credit card and a loan. The way the recipe works is that they know that loans typically require more underwriting, or at least they require a little bit more due diligence than credit cards. Credit cards you can get much more easy. So if you have both, if you only have one, you may score okay, but if you want to actually have a more optimal score, it's good to have a mix of credit, not just to have one piece of credit. So that is what's in the recipe. And then the next part of this is probably, so what is a good credit score? And I would suggest that I'll give you a few different numbers to think about. One is if you have a credit score that is below 600 and you're trying to get a mortgage or a car loan, you will either get declined or you will probably pay a much higher interest rate. So if you're below 600, your interest rates, if you can get a loan, are going to be higher. In the 600 to 700 range, when it comes to mortgages, usually you can make that work. You may find that there are some limits, though, on what is possible in that range. If you're above 700, your basic 700 plus, you're basically you have a key to the vault. You'll have access to the most lending, the most programs, the cheapest money. So if you're an investor or even if you're a first-time buyer, if you can keep your score anywhere around 700 or above, you should have no problem being able to get financing, at least based on credit. So I hope that answers what goes into a credit score. If you have any questions, you can email me at scott@scottpeckford.ca. And also I have a copy of that credit guide that I've written, and I'm happy to send that to you.